I'm sure we have a lot of questions in the audience. I have a couple to start off with. I mentioned when I introduced the film that Albert had been talking about this film for as long as I knew him, and probably most of his life. And so, how did this film finally get to be made, and how did you connect with it?
Well, Albert had pitched it, as you know, for about 30 years.
Yeah.
And
every time I saw him, have I told you about my train film?
Exactly. And what happened was, actually, if you saw in the special thanks, it was John Blair, who at that time was with the newly started Al Jazeera America, who came to us and said, I would really like to do a project with Albert, and came to visit us. And when we went over to Albert's house, he had just come back from a long trip, and we were talking a little bit, and I remember thinking at the time, Albert, don't talk about the train film. And of course, the first thing Albert said, have I told you about my train film? And I'm rolling my eyes thinking that this isn't going to go anywhere, and John said, I'd like to be the man who makes your train film. So that's how it started.
And had you worked with Albert before this? Or is there
Not really, but Nelson and I, my filmmaking partner Nelson and I have known the Maisels family for years, and Nelson and I make.
And they were living with Albert. They should also.
Oh yes, we rented an apartment in Albert's brownstone.
I see.
But we also make films sort of in a similar style to the Maisels brothers, kind of an observational approach, and so I think that having seen our films, Albert knew that we would, we kind of spoke the same language. So I think that's why he also trusted us to come on board.
Great. And I'm trying to remember Albert's pick. There was a story he told, because he shot a little bit of it, or little pieces of it over the years, and there was a story about the woman he met on the train.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
There's a mother, hasn't seen her daughter in so many years.
Yeah.
Albert meets her on the train. She's going to see her mother. She hasn't seen her in a long time. She's got her son with her. They get off the train. Albert follows her into the train station. The mother comes up to her. She grabs the daughter. She hugs her, and she says, isn't she gorgeous?
Yeah.
Channeling Albert.
That is Albert's pitch. So can you talk a little bit about, the conversations you guys had with Albert and before jumping into this, and then if there's any rules that you kind of set for yourself? And then also, how many train trips did you guys take?
Well, I can tell you about the rules. There were a lot of rules, and Albert disregarded all of them. I was terrified that we were not going to get what we needed, so I started this process where we were going to seed the train. I had our interns and researchers looking for people who were going to take train trips around the time that we had scheduled our trips to happen, so that we could potentially follow them and have people that we knew were going to be on the train who perhaps we might be able to get their stories at the same time, because we had a limited budget and we knew that we could only make a certain number of trips, and my concern was what happens if we take an entire trip and we don't get anything on it. And Albert thought this was the worst, stupidest idea that he'd ever heard, and just kept saying, it'll happen, it'll happen, it'll happen. It's really 3 round trips that comprise most of what you see here, but I should let Lynn talk about that, because she really did most of the editing on that.
Yeah, we took 3 round trips on the train from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest and back, and then a 4th trip in cars, driving alongside the train to get those exteriors of the train passing by. So yeah, there was like a bit over 400 hours of material, because we had 4 to 5 cameras rolling at any given moment on the train. Again, it was shot as Albert wanted in, direct cinema style, nothing set up.
Are there any characters that Albert captured himself, or any moments in the film that Albert captured that you guys really liked or want to talk about?
Well, the main storyline that made it into the film that Albert was filming on was the pregnant woman and the photographer who befriended her. So again, we didn't plan anything, so we weren't trying to pull a certain number of scenes that Albert shot, a certain number that Nelson shot. It was really just, I was just pulling what I thought was the best material that had the most potential. But it turned out this pregnant woman storyline made it in, and that was the scene. Those were the scenes that Albert was most involved in. And so one of my favorite moments is when the pregnant woman is leaving the train toward the end of the film. It's Albert actually filming, the photographer showing Albert his viewfinder, filming the young woman running off to the station, which I think is really poignant because, you know, that photographer became a very good friend of Nelson and mine after shooting. He lives in Staten Island. I'd hoped he might come tonight, but I guess he wasn't able to. And when he heard that Albert Maysles was on that train, he instantly got very emotional, sort of realizing the synergy in their lives as these two men sort of out on these sort of missions of discovery and
last trips.
Yeah, and in the kind of in the later stages of their life. And so when they got to meet, I think the photographer, whose name is Joel, was quite moved, and it was really nice to see them together, kind of almost shooting each other, you know, and having conversations.
Now, I understand that you guys were able to show Albert like a week or a couple weeks before he passed a cut of the film, or
It's days, actually.
Or days, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that and what his...
Sure. Actually, it was about 3 or 4 days. I'm not remembering exactly now, but I had come over. Lynn and Nelson had finished, and Lynn had given me a DVD of the final cut. And Albert lives about 5 blocks from our office, and I'd been over to his house every day, and he wasn't always well enough or awake enough to watch what we had, and I knew he wanted to see it, and so I'd come over, and often I would just, bring my computer and sit there, because he liked to think that things, were still going on around him while he was there, and sometimes he'd wake up and go, let's talk business, but, then he'd fall back to sleep, and so one day I came in and his wife said, I really think he wants to see it today, and I didn't believe that he was going to be able to. So he had this big screen, probably about, about 50 inches. And he had his caregiver and I lift him close to the screen. And we had him, about as close as I am to Lynn now. And then finally he had us put him about as far from the screen as my hand is from my face. And I'm thinking, nobody can see anything from there. And also he was a lot heavier than I thought. But we got him right in front of the screen and we put it on, and I was sure, because he never stayed awake at that point for more than about 20 minutes at a time, that he wasn't going to make it through, and I kept saying, are you still watching, Albert? And he always nodded his head. He didn't always say yes, but he always nodded his head. And he watched the whole thing, which was the longest I'd seen him awake in weeks, and at the end he just said, that's it, that's good. And then he went to sleep. And that it was like a moment for him. It was, it was sort of the finale, and that was the last time I saw him really lucid. Was when he stayed up to watch the entire film.
Eventually, after months of rough cutting, I just kind of assigned myself an organization strategy, just kind of organizing principles so I wouldn't go crazy, which was to sort of, I kind of realized that, the Empire Builder line itself, if you were to ride it from Chicago to Seattle or back, it's 3 days each way. So I kind of thought of it as this kind of maybe 3-day, 3-act structure if you were a passenger. So my first section of the film, I started assembling the stories that sort of felt like they followed people who had just gotten on the train. So they were looking forward into the future, and they were, anticipating where they were going next, and it was like, looking forward. And then the second section of moments, I sort of assembled the ones that felt like ones you might have if you had been on the train for 24 hours and you'd settled into your seat, you were more relaxed, more reflective, maybe thinking into the past of where you'd come from. And then finally, it sort of made sense to me eventually that the final act would be the stories of people who sort of realized, I have to get off this train pretty soon. I have to face the music, face reality again. So like really dealing with the present, sort of more anxious. There were definitely no instructions. Again, we just wanted to create an environment that enabled people to feel comfortable sharing whatever stories they felt comfortable sharing. Again, for a Maysles kind of film, it's not so much what the stories are as much as it is how they're told and how they're shared. We had this wonderful story producer with us named Martha Wallner, who had worked with Albert many times in the past, and she was kind of like a documentary casting director. So it was her job to actually kind of go with the crew on each trip and just start, going up and down the train and meeting as many people as she could and kind of figuring out what their story might be and seeing if they might be amenable to being filmed. And so she would really feed stories and passengers off to the camera operators. But I think there were definitely people who didn't want to be filmed, but we were trying to be as respectful as possible, and we avoided, we definitely respected their privacy.
Well, there are a lot of answers to that one. I mean, he had a passion for trains, and one of the, there were many stories he told about trains. I'd say two of them that really spoke to me. One was how he felt that there was this intimacy that occurred on the train, and that you're in this space that's so shared and so private, yet so impersonal in a way, and you have this ability to be so close to someone, but know that the moment is fleeting and that this intimacy is going to disappear quickly, and that it allows strangers to become friends, and he loved capturing that intimacy. Men had 1,000 stories, so I'm sure Lynn can probably also offer a different perspective.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think also Albert just loved people, and it was such a, breeding ground for just meeting interesting people kind of thrust together in this contained space, and, you're stuck together for a few hours or a few days, and he loved that dynamic. He thought that was really ripe for crossing paths with people you wouldn't normally spend that much intimate time with, and people open up on a train, it's like, Nelson calls it sort of like a moving confessional, especially with cameras. We were pretty amazed at what people were telling us, in their 1 hour in the observation car, looking out a window. So I think it does sort of support these very special, sort of unique moments with people.
Yeah, and he was always looking for ways to get at that intimate personal connection. Albert used to purposely run out of gas so he could meet people and have a chance to talk to them and spend time with them when they would take him to a gas station, and just wait to see who'd come along. He just liked that kind of thing.
It is a great train. Honestly,
It's nasty. Everybody
got
sick. No, but I heard of Albert smelled by the end. It's nasty.
Albert always smelled. No, it's great. But it's America. Seriously, guys. I'm not even trying to vouch for Amtrak. I'm just saying I think it's a really interesting journey to just be among people on this long car for.
There's also a split. She goes camping in the Congo. I don't go camping like the cats do.
So maybe a question would be, what was the relationship with Amtrak? And you said it took 2 years to get. What was the?
Our relationship with Amtrak was wonderful, but Amtrak is incredible bureaucracy. It was mind-numbing to work through it, but they were also the loveliest people in the world. The dichotomy was amazing at times. I love those Amtrak guys. I could have killed those Amtrak guys. And they have been big supporters of the film since, we started filming it and since it's been out. So.
And I'll just add that I think that this wouldn't have been possible had it not been Albert who wanted to make this film, because all of those Amtrak guys, the executives we met with, were kind of his generation. So they got Gimme Shelter. They realized we were not a reality TV crew. I think they really understood what we were doing, and that enabled them to be super hands-off with us.
So my last question is, what's going on with the Maisels Film Center, and will there be post-Albert productions coming our way from young filmmakers? Is there anything we can look forward to seeing in the near future?
In fact, you can. We're working on a couple of productions right now. One is a film on a group of schools for young men of color in crisis that are 6 schools throughout New York City called the Eagle Academies, and we are in pre-production on that right now. We are also working on, which I'm not supposed to say right now, but I'm going to anyhow. We just signed an MOU and are starting development on a film about the downtown restaurant. Well, around here, I guess. I never go downtown. Raoul's, and that one we're working on to finish in 2018. So on the history of the restaurant and the family who started it. So those are the 2 projects we have going right now.
So let's thank Lynn and Erika for coming up tonight.